When we look at sort of the antiplatelet space, there's been a number of large trials recently looking at dual antiplatelet therapy approaches for a number of different conditions. The more we see from ticagrelor, it seems the more positive information that we're getting from it. What does this add to the discussion around the robustness of ticagrelor as an agent and sort of where it falls in line with the other antiplatelet agents out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, the real comparator for ticagrelor is clopidogrel. And I would say, here we don't have a direct comparison of those two agents. And I'm reluctant to make an indirect comparison. I think we see that ticagrelor works in reducing ischemic events. We see that it also increases hemorrhage to a lesser extent. We've also seen that with clopidogrel in the same patient population or very similar patient population. Yes, there are differences between those two, but they're not that great. I guess the one piece that really does need to get resolved is this issue of variability in response related to a person's genome, and that whole issue of whether polymorphisms in liver enzymes, the CYP enzymes, are important for converting clopidogrel to its active compound. In the stroke literature, there have been studies that have suggested that in the population that can't convert clopidogrel to its active form, that it doesn't work. There's no benefit in terms of stroke risk reduction. Ticagrelor doesn't have that problem. As far as we know, there isn't genetic variability in its metabolism, as far as we know. And so one would think that it would be more consistently effective than clopidogrel based on the data that's available today. But I will say that if that were the case, one would expect ticagrelor to have a larger relative risk reduction for ischemic events, which was not seen in THALES compared to POINT, for example. POINT is a clopidogrel aspirin versus aspirin trial. Why? Well, they're different patient populations. Entry criteria are different. Bigger strokes in THALES compared to POINT. The follow-up was way better in THALES than it was in POINT. Maybe there's something there. So there are a number of reasons why that might be the case, but I wouldn't want to overinterpret that. So you've got a theoretical benefit of ticagrelor related to it not requiring conversion to become active, but that's not being seen in the overarching populations that have been studied thus far.
All right, and just lastly, before we go, based on this data, I know I had mentioned before, ticagrelor recently received an approval earlier this year. I think it marked its third approval since 2012 it had received. Do you think, based on this information, we could see a potential another indication for ticagrelor coming?
Yes, I think it's likely that it will be approved for patients with mild moderate ischemic stroke and high risk TIA who can be treated within 24 hours of symptom onset.